What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast that is a proud partner of the Hero Step Podcast Network of the Blue Wire family. I'm your host, Numac, getting deservedly distracted by my lovely co-host, Jordan Tresky, here, throwing up the biggest W I've ever seen with his fingers. How's it going, buddy?
Hello. Rock on, as they say.
I'm not even
Put
sure
them
like what that
horns.
was. It was like
I don't know.
a big ol' W.
Big.
You were like
It's probably something nefarious on the internet that I don't know
you and Matthew
about. But
McConaughey are throwing that up at the soonest Texas game.
yeah, with my shaggy hair.
That's right. And you're starring in the first season of True. What's that series called? True.
Detective.
Yeah, Detective. I was gonna say True Crime, but like that's not right. True Blood's not right. But you can like pound on the door in I think it's Interstellar or Arrival, whichever space alien.
Interstellar.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so don't ask me. Sorry, Adam and Andrew. Anywho's will be. We have a little bit of a discussion on tap today about examining Matt LaFleur's place in Packers history as his head coach in tenure rolls on, and one of the more, I guess, not lofty but pretty hot starts to a coaching tenure I think we've seen in recent memory. Uh, Particularly with his 3-13, right? 3 or 4. I think it's 3. 3 years in a row starting with 13 wins, and then had the one down year in the Aaron Rodgers year, sub 500, and then last year going 9-8. So looking to be on pace to get back to that 13 win mark this season. But before we to get to that, a little bit of news and notes coming out of 1265 Lombardi Avenue. Uh, First and foremost, it seems as if Josh Jacobs and company have been sort of talking about their trip to Brazil coming up week 1 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and it doesn't seem to be the greatest. Maybe not the most well planned out idea from the NFL. Maybe we shouldn't be playing a game in this country, Brazil, at the current time. But Josh Jacobs talking about how both teams have been advised that they are not allowed to wear green whatsoever because of the gang affiliations that are in Brazil at the moment, and that they will not be allowed to leave their hotels prior to the game. Which begs the question. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a part. And they will be traveling to and from their hotel should they be leaving in armored vehicles. Which begs the question, I guess, why are we doing this kind of thing? Why did we schedule 2 teams that wear green to play there? And I guess, yeah, just why is my biggest question. But what are your thoughts on it, Jordan?
No, I think that's a fair question. Uh, they really doubled up on the green, different shades of green too. Um, I guess this is just what it is going to come down to. You know, it's probably not going to be a fun week for the players, I would imagine. Uh,
No, I'd imagine it kind of be kind of shitty, frankly.
yes, I think so too. I mean, this is the it's not the cost, but it's the stuff that we don't think about when kickoff happens. We think we're like, oh yeah, the season's starting. Look at they're playing in Brazil. This is gonna be great. Look at the Packers making history, playing in South America and all this stuff. And then you realize, oh, this is what the players have been going through leading into it. And I don't know. It's I guess things need to be done, or what is it, an end to the means kind of thing like that. But
Right. Do
it's the
the ends
NFL.
justify the means?
Yes, yes. The NFL doesn't really care.
Apparently
They're looking
not. And I think that's part of the issue, right?
That's part of the issue, and they probably knew this going into it and still
You'd hope so.
planned for the teams that are wearing the color that is not allowed in the stadium on top of the conditions that they're going to be traveling in. But
Right. I think
yeah,
at best case, they understood the I guess the situation and still put the Eagles and the Packers in the situation, despite the circumstances surrounding, I guess, the state of, not to get into geopolitics, not that we're either of us are qualified to speak on it, but given the news, like the information that Josh Jacobs said on the podcast he was on, um, if they have to travel in armored vehicles and can't leave their hotel room, if they knew that that was going to be the case ahead of time and still scheduled an NFL game there just for the sake of growing the game and growing their popularity, it seems like if I'm the NFLPA, I'd probably be pretty pissed about that. And like the worst case is that they just didn't do any sort of due diligence and have planned this whole thing now. And once it was planned with teams and things like that, international representatives came through and were like, hey, this is what you're going to need to do to ensure player safety, which isn't any better. Like there's
No.
it's really not a fantastic look from the NFL. Like I didn't think we'd get this serious on the pod ever, frankly, but it's it's not a good look. I guess in my opinion, if what Josh Jacobs is saying is like going to be the letter of the law. Not that I'm saying he would lie, but we haven't seen anything like official from the NFL per se.
No. And we'll see. There's still what? Probably, I think 3 months to the day, right?
95 days or so. There was
Is
a
it?
Gilbert Brown number of days, like 2 days ago.
There we go.
So like something in the
Um,
90s.
Brazil is a country that has recently, in the last decade, hosted the World Cup, Men's World Cup. They have hosted the Olympics
Yep.
in 2016.
Yep.
I don't know. I cannot tell you offhand that the conditions of, more so probably the men playing the World Cup, because Olympic Village being built in Brazil is different than, you already have a built-in sanctuary.
Right.
Whereas athletes traveling from city to city, playing in Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, elsewhere around the country, I'm sure they were probably, you know, razzed or whatever, some form of hazing that South American soccer fans love to do,
Right.
because yeah, then they get lose to Germany 7-1. Anyway, that's what happened. The Brazil team got like
I
massacred.
I understand that happened. You didn't need to bring it back up again. God
Just
damn.
I'm just saying. Um, but it's not like this country's ill prepared to have a game. I'm not like, I think we have to make it clear, because there are some people they'll
Right.
look at that and be reflective of the country and the community
Right.
that lives there. And
Correct.
I would say no.
I would correct. You and I are on the same page.
Yes. So yeah, just putting that
Yeah.
out there for additional context.
Yeah, it's nothing that reflects on the country of Brazil and its people. Just the situation that all athletes are have to go through when they go there, kind of thing. Like, I don't think it would be as big of an issue if they had two other like just throwing teams out there. Not that they would put the visual game down there, but like the Browns and the Bengals, two just orange teams. Like they wouldn't have to worry about the whole green fiasco. They wouldn't like they. I'm sure they'd still be on like lockdown in their hotels and traveling in protected vehicles, but I think that's just the state of um, the situation down there. Again, geopolitics. I'm not
And really,
one to
I think
speak on
part of
it.
it, too, is it's the NFL. This is, again, it's going to be a historic moment for Brazil. This
Right.
they are the site, the country, the home country. Sao Paulo is the home city that will be playing the first NFL game in the continent. I don't think that should be tossed away. And I would argue to say that, yeah, you're gonna, what probably other more famous teams than the United States of America during the World Cup were mobbed by a lot of people in Brazil during
Right.
that time.
Right.
So it's probably that's why it probably veers more on that side of things, and making sure, in the sense of welcoming the Packers and the Eagles, and this kind of being a, uh for lack of a better word, like a state trip,
Mm-hmm.
like for the State Department. Like, it is like a
Right.
touristy kind of thing. I think that is also in play too,
Yeah.
of why things are probably going to be more extra precautious from both sides.
Right. Worth noting that Brazil is the seventh most populated country in the United or in the world, uh, only behind India, China, the U.S., Indonesia, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And it's not like, I forget where I saw it, but I know when I saw like the people like answering questions about justifying why the game was there, they have a really large football
Mm-hmm.
fan base, like NFL football
Yeah.
fan base in Brazil. So it makes sense there to like again to grow the game. It just brings into question a couple of logistical things when it comes to planning it and the safety of the players. But I'm sure it'll all be well and good. I know you and I both and everybody else hope it's all good. And I just think it's worth noting to talk about that. Like they're getting a little bit of direction from the NFL thus far, and I'm surprised I haven't seen anything from the NFLPA yet.
Yeah.
So moving on to another news and notes, we got some words from Brian Kuhnenkunst, who was um, on the radio with 97.3 this week on uh, the Packers and Jordan Love's contract negotiations. Quote, we're in those conversations right now. Both parties want the same thing. We'd like to get this done before training camp for sure, end quote. Um, I think just that's a significant update coming from Goody. Because I know you and I had talked on the pod over the offseason, I guess earlier in the offseason, that the earliest that Jordan Love could sign his extension was I think it was early in May, a year and a day after he had signed his extension last year. And then once that had come and passed, a lot of people on Twitter were saying like, okay, the beginning of June, once the new league year starts, is when we can expect to see his contract or his extension announced. That has since come and gone. So training camp begins, I think what July 28th, 26th, something like that, Jordan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe it's 26.
Yeah, so late July. That's dating this pod June 6th, so about 2 months, a little bit short of 2 months um, away. And I don't think that's the panic time if like they don't get it done before training camp, but I think it's definitely the time where we can start being like, okay, what's the holdup from either side? And I think the Packers media members would have the same questions first day of training camp.
Yeah, I think we talked about it at multiple points, knowing that okay, when that date passed, is that it was going to be brought up during OTAs, going to be brought up in the media, asking Brian Gutekunst about it. It's just kind of lingering more than anything. And at this point, it's kind of you can excuse it for what it is. But the closer you get to these kind of manufactured deadlines of where the training camp starts or when people players start coming back to town to really kind of fully train for the season and stuff like that. That's where not that it's a distraction now, but it could easily become like, talking about how, not that it would ever get to this level, but the Dak Prescott with the Cowboys of like that feels like it's every year now.
Right.
Are they going to extend them? And this kind of whole thing lingering over that franchise, among other things. Um, so yeah, I think for now it's you're like, oh, okay, take that into consideration, another checkpoint kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Like
until
a mark by it. Just a little note.
yeah, and it's like until there is some movement, until things actually get agreed upon, or if it lingers past that deadline, then it's like we'll have. I feel like we'll have like real discussions regard. You know what I mean? There's gonna be something to be said about things going down or things not happening because of X, Y, and Z.
Right. Exactly. So not too much else that way. Not too much else with Packers news. I think Jordan Morgan is the only rookie not to sign his deal yet. So I think Javon Bullard, Bouillard, signed his this week. So Jordan Morgan's will come in due time as his agent and the Packers negotiate signing bonuses when they get them this, that, and the other. So um, other like the shortest thing, Mike Daniels was that training camp or at mini camp this week or OTAs
Mm-hmm.
OTAs. So interesting to see him back. I think someone had said that he got a high school D line coaching gig, so he might have been there for some tips, tricks, and how tos. So cool to see him back, kind of thing. But
Mm.
um, other than that, Jordan, anything else? Which we hop into our topic of discussion today.
Let's hop in this hot topic that
Do
we're.
you want to buy like scene emo things in this hot topic, or what are we buying
I'll
there?
buy my Taking Back Sunday shirt, which also applies to football.
God. Well, why? All right.
That was I was getting cute without the E. That's what I believe in Taking Back Sundays.
This has gone on too far. Matt
Yes.
LaFleur, the Packers head coach. I was gonna say as of right now, but that's a very dumb thing to say. The current Packers head coach started his tenure in 2019, 13-3. His first two seasons, 13-4 in 2021. His first 3 years, a record of 39-10 in the regular season. Um, did lose in the conference championship his first 2 years, and then in the divisional round in 2021. 8-9 in 2022 and 9-8 in 2023 in the first year of the Jordan Love era. I think a lot of the discussion that I've seen just amongst Packers spaces has been a lot of back and forth between Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love, where it's Jordan Love is only good because he has Matt LaFleur, and Matt LaFleur is only good because he's had Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. And I think stemming from that, you had this idea of examining sort of his place as a coach in Packers history. And you said we are thinking about what we wanted to do for a pod this week. You had mentioned you were thinking about this a lot, and I want you to tell people and me, I guess, why was this such a thing top of mind for you? What has got Matt LaFleur get your brain juices going?
Why do I got Matt LaFleur on the brain?
That's right.
Well, one,
Besides, because he's so cute.
sure. I I don't mean to go to not be an improv partner and just go no,
Yep,
but I'll go sure instead of yes and.
got it.
No, I think one, I can remember when he was hired and the excitement that I had about that time of being a very disillusioned Packer fan at that time because I thought things had run their course with Mike McCarthy well before they actually made the decision to move on from him. I thought he was a very interesting hire at the time, and when new spirit, new blood, new energy kind of comes into the team that you watch every year, you again talking about like these points or demarcations of stuff like that. Like, oh, it's been it's been 5 seasons since he has been hired as the head coach of the Packers. So I think in terms of where the NFL is at with a lot of coach movement, um, he's now becoming one of the most or the longest one of the longest tenured head coaches in the league,
Mm-hmm.
despite being really young. In his place in like Packers history, he's coached 83 games. He's 56-27. You mentioned the playoff record, which is not insignificant in this discussion, but he will, in terms of like Packers coaches, which there are many great ones. That's the thing of like trying to get into this kind of Mount Rushmore by default. Is that you have the Super Bowl winning coaches, you have Curly Lambeau who won championships before Super Bowls even existed. You have Mike Holmgren who helped revive the franchise among other people. Like there's already a really built-in three, and then four with McCarthy because he won the Super Bowl. You
Right.
give him his everlasting
His,
respect.
yep.
But Matt LaFleur is entering a very interesting point in my mind, in that he's 1 win away from tying Mike Sherman for Packer most wins in Packers history. For that'll be fifth place. He's coached 83 games, as I mentioned before. That he will likely, if everything goes well this year, pass Mike Sherman in games coached, and then be among 6 coaches that have coached 11 or 100 games this coming year. If everything goes well, barring some horrible drop off that would consider he basically has to last the entire year to hit that mark and not get fired. So to me, I think it's very interesting to examine what he means already to the Packers because he has enough years under his belt to kind of reflect on where he's at. And I would not I think last year we were kind of in this phase and we definitely when the season started and things didn't go to plan or weren't executed as much as we anticipate going into the year. We had very real discussions about what does this mean for LaFleur moving forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I'm not saying that he has kind of this unlimited runway, but we also know that this is a franchise that does not they've had what three, four head coaches if you count 1 year of Ray Rhodes in the last 30 years. This is not a team that likes to fire coaches on a whim.
No, not at all.
They stick it out even when things are going through ugly losses, dispiriting losses, as Matt LaFleur has done in the playoffs anytime the Packers have lost in the playoffs. So I don't think he has an unlimited runway as I mentioned before. But I would say, given where the Packers are at, and if everything keeps going up as we anticipate, we could be talking about Matt LaFleur being the Packers head coach for like the next 5, maybe 10 years.
I mean, I
I
think
don't
at
think
least
that's
that, right?
like it would have to be something that he would have to walk away from if you know what the biggest thing left remaining from his resume
Mm-hmm.
is accomplished.
Right.
I'm saying a lot of things. Now I'm going to turn over to you
Yeah.
to see where you stand.
Well, I think it's an interesting topic, right? Because you can't. I'm looking at uh, Packers coaches records, like you had mentioned, over the past what 92 is when Holmgren got hired. So
Yes,
30, 32 years
32 years, basically as long as I've been alive.
predates me. You
Yeah,
old. But going between Mike Holmgren, like you had said, Ray Rhodes was um, a 1 year hired,
I remember that.
and then Mike Sherman, Mike McCarthy, and now Matt LaFleur. And Mike Holmgren in his first 5 years went 9-7, 3 years in a row, 11-5, 13-3 the year they won the Super Bowl. Go over to Mike Sherman, starts his first year 9-7, and then rips off 12-12, 10-10 uh, years through 2004. Then you had the abysmal 4-12 year, the year that got him fired. And then the first year of McCarthy, 8-8, 13-3, 6-10, 11-5, and then 10-6 the year they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
There hasn't been a start like Matt LaFleur's in this tenure, and I think that's what's like really makes a great point of what you're trying to get at is that should Matt LaFleur keep pushing this team to its highest potential, and I think what we're expecting this team to sort of get at within the next 2-3 years, given their youth and their talent, that's hopefully going to keep developing. I don't see why he couldn't have a McCarthy-esque run as Packers head coach. McCarthy was head coach from 2006 was his first season, and his last year was 2018, so 12 years. Holmgren was only in Green Bay for 7. Like in terms of lengthy coaches in Packers history, there is a good chance Mike McCarthy could be up there for um like second, third all time, depending on how long he's around. Lombardi, as heralded as he is, was only in Green Bay for about 9-10 years. Curly Lambeau was here for the longest at 29, so I don't think
yeah.
he could be here for that long if all goes very, 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 very well.
Mike Tomlin might have a better chance than Matt LaFleur, but it just shows you.
Right, but I'm just like saying that for as much as the Packers don't like to fire coaches, if Matt LaFleur keeps having winning seasons and keeps having success, like Mike McCarthy got his Super Bowl under his belt early, and I think that bought him a lot of runway into into the years ahead. Like given like look at it, they made what eight straight years of not making a Super Bowl after that until he finally got fired. And so
On the flip side, too, it like as much as we disparage the post Super Bowl years of not capitalizing on what they had,
entirely not his fault is yeah.
not yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some of
Uh,
that, but not a lot.
yeah. Um, did go to two conference championships.
Yep.
One that they should have won, and one that they were completely unmatched for
Yeah.
against the very good Falcons team.
Yep. And so I think this is an interesting discussion. Like, what does, as I ponder my orb, what does the future look like for Matt LaFleur? Because I think he's, in my quick math, had the best, like, first 5 years as a coach in Packers history. Because he had 3 years of
His
third
winning percentage right now is 67.5%. That's second behind Lombardi, just ahead of Holmgren. So
in
you'd
like
be correct.
total in like total seasons, right?
Of yes,
But
of
not
total seasons.
not their first 5 years.
Not their first 5 years,
Right.
but I would imagine it's pretty close.
I think I think it's first because um going back all the way to like when Curly Lambeau his first 5 years, uh obviously that's a way different league and a way different NFL. But they went 3-2, 4-3, 7-2, 7-4, 8-5 the first 5 years of the Packers' existence. Jump ahead to Lombardi 7-5, 8-4, and then 11, 13, and 11 wins. Like he already has 8-9 beat for the first 2 years of Lombardi's coaching career, and then he has two more wins in the 11-year wins that Lombardi had. Holmgren, same thing, like I mentioned earlier, 9-9-9, 11-13. So like he has, I think, the best start to a coaching career um, in Packers history, and that's exciting. Obviously, it's had a lot of playoff heartbreak to it. I think that has been the flip side of this coin, right? Is Matt LaFleur, great regular season coach, hasn't been able to make the Super Bowl despite having these very good teams in front of him. Like, and the same thing goes with McCarthy to LaFleur. You can't fault them for how the players play and the mistakes they made. You can't fault Matt LaFleur for Kevin King losing Scotty Miller, I think his name was,
You're correct.
at the end of the first half in the Bucks championship game.
Yep.
You can't blame Matt LaFleur for Anders missing a field goal last year in the divisional round. I think the other 49ers won, or the other 49ers conference. What was the 2019 conference? At the 49ers, and they got absolutely railroaded.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was again an unmatched
an
team. Yep.
unmatched team. Yeah, and so it's interesting. I think this is actually a very not topical topic, but a very interesting topic.
Um, Matt LaFleur has the 11th highest winning percentage in NFL history.
What is the qualifier on that? 100 games coach or something?
No, this is not. This is
Oh,
just
just in
straight,
general.
yeah, from Pro Football Reference. Of just
Gotcha.
like because Nick Sirianni is has the second highest of like active coaches behind
Right,
Matt
and he
LaFleur,
only
and
has
obviously
like one season,
he's only
right?
coached 3 years.
Right.
So, but that just shows you how he hit the ground running. And yes, it is inheriting a lot of the talent and being able to kind of put things back in its rightful place kind of way with Rogers and company and all that stuff.
Right.
But I do think it is very similar to McCarthy in the sense of like they're the only two that can really say, well, I coached this era of the Packers and now I'm coaching another era, which is where we're obviously getting into. And hopefully we think is as fruitful as it was going from Favre to Rogers to now Rogers to Love, kind of thing. But I think I think it's just very interesting of how he is viewed in the wider landscape, because I think, yes, in terms of if I'm a fan of another team and look at the Packers of like, well, this guy, look at what he inherited. He only did what he was supposed to be doing, and blah 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 blah. And then if you read any smart, informed kind of NFL analyst or really good Packers analysts and stuff like that, they'll tell you, well, you're not wrong, but you're not right because of just where things are and where things have progressed. Because we talked about last week, it's like this team, the fact that we're talking about this team being on the other side of a rebuild could have easily been longer, could have easily stretched out into
Yeah,
just being kind of not going anywhere. Like the fact that
yeah,
the bottoming out was 8-9 in after 3 13-win seasons,
yeah,
going 2-5, going 2-6 in the first half of last year's season, and thinking, oh, this is what we get for the youth movement and everything like that. Whereas now we're talking about this team being like an ascending team. Warren Sharp, this is kind of like cutting across. It's I don't know if it completely makes my point, but I saw a very interesting stat from Warren Sharp that I'm going to vamp a little bit, but it shows you for a team like the Packers and how we talked about them for the first half of the year
mm-hmm.
to the second half of the year of being obviously not the same and being very different teams and just how they kind of just carry themselves. Games won without ever trailing from last season. So there are 8 games where teams won without ever trailing. They were the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Lions. 7 was the Browns and the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
6 was the Bills, Jaguars, which I thought was very surprising,
That is surprising.
Dolphins, and the Packers.
So of their 9 wins, they won six
Of their
without ever
9
trailing,
wins, they won without ever trailing.
and 6 of them.
Yes. And I'm sure if I looked at the teams that they were playing in those games, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes
That
sense.
makes sense, kind of
But I would
thing.
imagine the Chiefs are in there.
I imagine the Thanksgiving Lions game is in there.
The Thanksgiving Lions game is in there for sure. Probably the second Bears game,
The second Vikings game.
second Vikings game for sure. It just shows like I don't know, like I'm not here to say past success is gonna is repeatable because it's
Right.
football, everything anything can happen.
Yep.
But we talked a lot about like, is there a good team in this Packers, youth movement for the first half of the year,
Right.
and the fact that things just went completely the other way and better than we could have imagined. I wonder if just like where they are heading or where they could be heading just kind of inflates LaFleur's standing in terms of just not just in Green Bay, but elsewhere.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. Like, is that is the stat you mentioned 6 of their 9 wins being wire to wire? Is that a coaching stat or is that a player stat? Like, I know that's a rhetorical question for you, but like, is LaFleur did LaFleur coach these guys up last year to reach their top of their potential or close to the top of their potential in their rookie, quote unquote, rookie seasons, and someone like Jordan Love, and their sophomore seasons with players like Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, and some of the guys on defense, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt. And how did that all interact and how did that work with the inner workings of getting those wins? Right? Does that make sense as like a question?
Yes.
Or is it just this team is really good and has a lot of potential now that there's a little bit of refresh in the room? Like, does Mike McCarthy get the most out of those guys? I'm not sure. Like, I think he might have. He's a good coach for as much as like to slander him and his failures in Dallas and things like that, and still not making conference championship in 30 years for the Cowboys. But I think it's like without question that Matt LaFleur is a good coach, arguably a great coach, and it's the bounce of the ball kind of like as a metaphor of if they get to if the ball bounces a different way in certain scenarios, in particularly literally with that was it Oren not Oren Burks, who was the other fella that recovered the fumble in the 49ers game? Eric Wilson.
Eric Wilson.
And like if that ball bounces differently, does do we have a more sour taste in our mouth coming out of that game? It's all so nuanced in because obviously we're not in the locker room, we're not in the film room and things like that, and how he's coaching these guys up. But it seems like a lot of the guys buy into Matt LaFleur as a coach. Like I think he's a little he's all business all the time. I think besides when he talked about uh
Lucas Van Ness's injury.
yep, that's a great way to put it. Um and I think he just gets a lot of respect out of that locker room, those players. And I think it helps that they're all a team now, and I think leadership comes from multiple places in that locker room. I think when Rodgers was in the building, everyone looked to Rodgers because he was the constant throughout that era of Packers football. And I don't think it helped that LaFleur comes in being younger than Rodgers when you have guys like Rodgers, Cobb, um, and other veterans who were like, and what's his name? Why am I blanking on his name? Mercedes Lewis, who are 14, 15-year veterans of the league, looking at this coach come in and be like, okay, does he really know like what's best for me when I've been in this league for so long? I'm not saying they disrespect him as a coach, but I think there was a difficulty in understanding the hierarchy for the team, particularly amongst the young guys, when it came to that tenure or that portion of Matt LaFleur's tenure. Now he's got 53 guys that are under 30 essentially. I think Preston Smith is like one of the only guys that's over 30.
Yeah, there's like four
There's
people I
like
think over
yeah,
30.
there's not a lot.
Yeah.
And they all like respect Matt LaFleur for what he's done either already as their coach in Green Bay in the case of someone like Preston Smith or them or Matt LaFleur just being those young players' first NFL head coach. Like
Yes.
he was Jordan Love's first NFL head coach. He was Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, all the young guys we talk about. He's the guy. It's not Rodgers anymore. He's gone. It's been LaFleur and Goody the whole way. And so if he's able to capitalize and turn that respect into motivation for the rest of this team, I again circling back to my point earlier, don't see it being a long shot possibility of LaFleur being the coach of this team through Jordan Love's entire career. Should it be a long one? Like that doesn't that's not a far fetched reality. I think whatsoever.
I don't think so either. I think part of it is like you mentioned, he is the first coach for a lot of these guys. And even the guys that may have played elsewhere, like, McKinney, Josh Jacobs, guys that, you know, whether it's through free agency or they'll pick up and whatever. Um, I was gonna say trade, but they don't really trade.
Not a whole lot.
And if they do trade, it's not for players necessarily; it's usually for picks. Um, but for LaFleur to kind of be, it's just fascinating to be like he was this is I shouldn't say was, but the McVay Shanahan acolyte, kind of the caretaker, restoring the Packers into good, standing again, to now being kind of like this, like you can kind of say like in terms of like going from players of like five tool players. Obviously, that's a term usually for baseball, but you can apply to any sport really, or their field of work in any kind of sport, especially like football. But like in terms of being a five tool coach, I don't think anybody would say Matt LaFleur is that on its face. but he's kind of worn every hat throughout his 5 years in Green Bay,
Yeah,
being the kind of players coach, relieving the tension. Aaron Rodgers' presence, I mean, it lingers even now,
right.
even indirectly.
I mean, even
And
like mediator between being like just a head coach that means business and is there for his guys. Like I think it can't be argued that he's always been there for his guys, but then you look at like how they handled Jair last year, before he even had his suspension in Week 17. They had it had come out a couple weeks ago that Matt LaFleur had fined him or given him some sort of punishment, for lack of a better term, earlier in the season for how he was acting. Like I don't think he's
yeah,
a pushover by any means. I think he knows how to command a locker room, and I think with a personality of somebody like Jair, with a leader of somebody like Jair, to be able to do that and still get the respect from Jair, I think says a lot about him.
and if we're being honest, that's a lot easier to achieve than a quarterback that
Yeah,
clearly has a god complex in some form or fashion
yeah, I think that's
without
not
getting into the
unfair.
weeds. Yeah. I'm just saying, I think to go from that kind of, again, point of view to now he's the kind of Jim Harbaugh comes to mind, but he's not dorky. Though he could probably find dorky things that Matt
Har-
LaFleur does.
yeah, Harbaugh's
But
definitely dorky though.
this like leader of men type persona, especially in Green Bay when it's Vince Lombardi, you can recite 50 quotes from Vince Lombardi
Mm-hmm.
that constitutes as like what it meant or what it means to play for the Packers, what it means to represent. Like it was very much like this very like holier than thou kind of. uh, that's not the right way I want to
Well,
say it, but like
I think what a good point, like a good thing to mention that to the point that you're getting at is that when we went on the tour for Lambeau last week, they talked about how the new entrance and the walkout onto the field has three big bricks of the old walkout from the original stadium, and like
yeah,
players walk across those bricks as they go onto the field every Sunday, every game. And for a guy like Matt LaFleur, who had no connections to Green Bay, had no sort of allegiance to Green Bay or the Packers prior to coming here, I think that says a lot about his, again, leader of men type of coaching style. Where our tour guide said that he saw Matt LaFleur take all the rookies out there and show them the bricks and show them the spots and like explain the historical context and what it means to play for Green Bay. I think that goes a long way in getting these guys to buy into what they're really sort of playing for the Packers.
yeah, and I that's where it's like no coach is perfect, even if it's
Of course
Andy
not.
Reid who's on this incredibly dynastic run with the Chiefs.
Well, even
In
before
large
that,
part,
like Andy Reid was pushed out of Philadelphia.
yeah, he was pushed out of Philadelphia. He was, not unlike probably LaFleur in some aspects. This very successful head coach that Super Bowl wins were obviously elusive and had terrible time management, things or game management snafus, fiascos.
Right.
And on top of that, he suffered like the first year that he went or coached the Chiefs. They lose to the Colts in this playoff game where they were, I believe, were up like 42-14 or something like that. It's one of the worst
I remember that.
comeback playoff losses in NFL history and stuff like that.
Yep.
So even a coach like him, who's really like making up for lost time with all these Super Bowl wins and just kind of being hailed as probably the best NFL coach in the last
Decades for sure.
uh, decade, longer,
I
definitely
mean,
this century.
you're gonna put him over Bill Belichick.
I forget about that, but
Like
he might get there.
decade is like where I kind of like push it because we're getting off topic, but like Belichick had, I think, two Super Bowl wins since 2014, and then I think maybe three actually, and then Andy Reid's right there too. Is it four?
15, 3. It's 3. 15, 17, 19.
Yeah. And so, um, like him and Belichick's like the best coach of the century, without a doubt. But yeah, Andy Reid in
Yeah,
the last 10 years is right there with them.
he's got three already. He could get four this year
Mm-hmm.
and three in a row, which is
That
either way.
yep.
Someone like him who's being hailed as this kind of, we think of like the modern coaches of the NFL, like the Shanahan's, McVays, LaFleur's, um, who's more McDaniel's kind of in that, like the kind of um just kind of like
The
advancing
new guard of the coaches.
the new guard, and they're pushing the envelope. They're
Yep.
bringing stylistic changes that other teams are copying and stuff like that. But it's funny that like when it comes time to winning the thing, and obviously it helps when your quarterback is possibly the greatest quarterback of all time. Um, it's Andy Reid there, who is really, you still coach the players that you are given. You know what I mean? Like you could say that, oh, it's because of Mahomes that he's getting all this success. They're still winning. They can still win three Super Bowls in a
Right.
row. Like that is not nothing.
No.
And I think that to me just shows you just how fickle it is to talk about coaches in the
Yeah.
first place. It's, I mean, we'll do it in a couple months when the season starts,
Yeah.
obviously. But it's so obvious to be like, yeah, the only thing Matt LaFleur needs is a Super Bowl. Like, yeah, that applies to
Everybody.
everybody. I just think it for him, it's like we could be watching someone that will be on the sidelines for certainly this generation of what the Packers is. And that's not nothing considering what the Packers have been. Because literally it's a team dripping with history of like you're walking on the same bricks that the players in the 1950s when Lambeau Field opened
Mm-hmm.
walked over
New
when
County
they were going
Stadium.
into games. New County State, like
New
all
City
that stuff.
Stadium. New City Stadium. My
New
apologies.
Cities, yes, all that stuff of like it's baked into their pregame intros. It's baked into the stadium. Obviously, it's
Mm-hmm.
baked into what they're doing at all times. And I think for someone like Matt LaFleur, especially with the team that is so young, and that we think anything is possible with where they are at, I think it's really interesting to have a coach that has been there for quite a while now, has had success, has had some playoff failures, but still went to three. Sorry, it should have been three, but two conference championships, and should have been two. Well, let's go one for sure. It should
Yeah.
have been one Super Bowl.
Right.
I just think it's very interesting to have someone like that that has really been successful and is now clearly managing the second era. Like it's wild to where NFL coaches are, just coaches in general. We're recording this right now with the UConn coach possibly leaving
Danny Hurley.
to coach. Yeah, Dan Hurley possibly leaving to coach the Lakers
After going back to back.
after going back to back. And there's just funny money going anywhere. It's how coaches are perceived in general of like they have the quickest leash out of anybody. Like they can be taken away. Like we'll fire you because your team is not performing the way it is. At the sec at that thought is that teams will throw ridiculous amounts of money to bring in a Jim Harbaugh, a Monty Williams, even if that's not going well.
Right.
Dan
I
Hurley.
right. I have a question for you, sort of as a devil's advocate part of this as part of this conversation, because
Yes.
you had mentioned coaches having quick leashes and ownership having quick leashes with coaches if success isn't instant and I guess eminent is another good word to use here.
Yeah.
How long right now is your leash for Matt LaFleur? Like how much time are you giving him? Should should
Ooh.
like bad season or seasons hit? Say they fall flat on their face this year. Knock on wood that doesn't happen. I don't think it's going to. But they go 5-12, and then come back next year. They go 6-11 or something. I guess like what is your injuries notwithstanding. How long are you willing to give Matt LaFleur to get this right, given, again, his past successes? I know it's a weird question to
I
ask, but I think it's important given the context of like where he is right now.
I think I was also looking up his contract terms, and unsurprisingly, they're not that readily available. He was extended after the 22 season, or after the 21 season in the 22 off season, but it's not really known of what how long that extension is. Same with Goody. Um, I would say 3 years.
3 years of not making the playoffs.
Not necessarily not making playoffs, but I think I think 3 years of you have to at least prove that if you're have room to grow, which they are at that stage,
Mm-hmm.
that you're ascending, and then once you pass that stage, if you maintain, you have probably probably 4 years to be like, we need something to come with that. Whether that's just appearing in a Super Bowl, whether that's winning a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of where I'm at.
Right. Because
What say
like
you?
I think like 2 years of not playoff level football, I think would be I don't want to say justified, but like a look at is he still the right coach for the team kind of thing. Because 8 and 9 with Aaron Rodgers and he was hurt. 9 and 8 last year after getting off to a slow start, but they fixed it kind of thing. But then they looked right for like 7 games right in a row, right? 7, 8 games in a row. You can arguably count the Niners game in the playoffs too. The expectations are
I
now
would.
a lot higher for this team than they were coming into last year. And if this team regresses a lot, I think that has to call into question like what's going on. Like we saw this team playing so well last year. What happened? New defensive coordinator. They can't always be the scapegoat for for a team's failures and the Packers' failures per se.
Yep.
So I think like after 2 years of 8 wins or less and not making the playoffs, I think that's a appropriate time to take a look at is he still the right coach for the team? But I think personally I'd give him like 3 because I think he
Would you give those this Packers team 3 or 4 years of like you need to win a Super Bowl based on what we've seen or based on what we hope?
they need to for him to keep his job, or just that they need to kind of thing. Because I don't think he needs to win a Super Bowl to
I
keep
don't
his job.
no, I don't think that either. But
Like
who knows?
if they're making division and conference championships every year, this was a question I had thought about earlier. Is like where does the idea of like Mike Budenholzer play in all of this? Like Mike Budenholzer wins a title in 21, has 3 unfortunate losses in the playoffs that aren't really under his control for the most part, like with Giannis being hurt and Chris being hurt, and just the injuries that had plagued this Bucks this iteration of the Bucks team prior to him leaving. I think it wasn't a bad time, wasn't a good time either. But you know what I'm saying? Like, how long does stagnant success get you? And I think for in the NFL, it's a long time. Like you have to win one eventually, and I think look at Mike Tomlin, look at Mike McCarthy. Both those guys won one early in their tenures as head coach, and they are like Mike Tomlin's still coasting off of those and going over
Yeah, it's been
500 every
15
year,
years.
something like that. Like 2000, yeah,
It'll be
2009
15 years for Tomlin, and then it'll be 14 for
for
McCarthy.
McCarthy. Obviously, McCarthy gets fired, then has a year off, gets a gig with Dallas, and he's still in the hot seat now. But I mean, Marvin Lewis stayed longer than he should have in Cincinnati, but he never came close to sniffing a Super Bowl. But he was always competitive with Cincy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other. I mean, Andy Reid in Philly was there a pretty long time.
Yeah, nearly a decade. I could bring up some coaches.
So I think it's just an interesting question. Like, I I would give him
John Harbaugh, he's won one Super Bowl.
early in his tenure, right? Was it was oh what's his name?
Joe Flacco.
No, 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 no. The other coach before him, the iconic coach before him.
Oh, Brian Billick.
Yeah, they didn't do anything with Billick. 'Cause I don't. Was Billick head coach with the 2000 team?
Yeah, the first Ravens Super Bowl, it was him.
So then he had a gig for a long time. I think Harbaugh got that job in like 2009, 10,
2008.
something like yeah. So early in his tenure, he's still the coach in Baltimore. At some point, he's got to win one, right? And hopefully, it's soon. I think it could be in the next couple of years, as from a fan perspective, and seeing how this team could rise. But um, yeah, I think it's. I think if he keeps making playoffs, this team keeps reaching its aspirations. I think the reason McCarthy got fired is because that team in 2018 was just underperforming so hard. Like it was just bad, right? Like it wasn't that the team was bad because they kind of ran it back with LaFleur in 19 and had success. It was just they weren't being coached well.
Well, and it was a true drain of talent because the year before that was Ted Thompson's last year. They kind
Right.
of, you know, talking about Ted Thompson now takes on a different tenor because he's passed, but like
Right.
it was very much like we're gonna move on from him as keep his dignity intact and everything like that. But then it's Goody taking over and the effects of Packers drafts that did not go well,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously everything with Rodgers too. They just ran its course. Like it wasn't always on McCarthy. Certainly at that point, I think there's a lot of things at play that
Right.
made it for 2 years of just being just kind of the dearth of really bad Packers teams. But it's
Contextually of Aaron Rodgers era Packers teams.
yeah, but they were yeah. It was just
Yeah.
the vibes are not great in a
No.
lot of ways.
Vibes were horrendous.
Horrendous. But it is to that end of going from that era to jumping to being a 13-3 team, going to
Mm-hmm.
the conference championship that where no one thought that was going to happen. And a lot of it was due to the moves that they made in free agency, but it's also that's not common for a first year head coach to just kind of walk in. And as we know very well, that was not Aaron Rodgers' greatest year either.
Nope.
There's a reason why they drafted a quarterback in the first round, thinking that
Yep.
not to relitigate all that stuff, but like
Right. There were
again,
questions.
it questions, and it wasn't like he had all the answers, but Matt LaFleur provided a lot of them. You know, so I don't know. It's we're not going to know the full breadth of his legacy now because obviously it's still being written.
Right.
But I do think how Matt LaFleur, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Matt LaFleur could easily be here as long as Mike McCarthy has been.
Yeah. Even longer if
I don't
he.
think that's
I
crazy.
don't think it's.
Like
I don't think it's out of the realm possibility whatsoever.
again, he's gonna pass probably gonna pass Mike Sherman this year in terms of games coach.
Right.
Not just that, but obviously pass him and wins, hopefully. But then it's like you mentioned Curly Lambeau, Mike McCarthy. Bart Starr is the only one that really the only reason why he hung on as long as he did was because his name was Bart Starr. And
Right.
if you look at his record objectively, you'd be like, why?
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's where it's like it's getting to be a very interesting conversation of Matt LaFleur, not just in the moment of this season, of next season or whatever. It's like, no, he's putting together a full resume. And how we kind of view this chapter in Packers history will very much be defined by can they continue on the up and up? Can they even just maintain what they've been doing for the better part of my life of just being a really good football team that
Yeah.
at the very least we could say, yeah, they have a chance to win this year. And as much as we want that vindication of a championship, because God, it feels really good.
It does feel really good.
It feels really good. But I do think there is also something to be said of the fact that you can go into every year thinking that your team has a chance because hope is almost better than like results sometimes. I'm just saying,
You're not wrong. It's a drug. That hope.
it's a drug.
It's the hope is what kills you.
Yeah, journey versus the destination. Because
Right.
sometimes you have to really feel it to get to the destination.
Right. No, I think it's a good discussion. That was a good topic, Jordan. That was a fun one.
Thank you.
But that does it for us, folks. That's it for this week's episode of Talk of the Tundra. Good discussion on Matt LaFleur as we end OTAs this week. Was this the last week of OTAs? So we're kind of getting into the true depth of the offseason. I think they have minicamp in a couple weeks, but we're still
Yes.
in the middle of it. But we'll be here for you guys to talk all things Packers news and the eventual Jordan Love extension because that'll be a lot to talk about. If you would want to hear everything we had to say without ads and all the other GSPN podcasts without ads, head over to gspn.info. That'll bring you to our Substack where you can subscribe to our premium Substack, which you get all the regular pods that you already get in your podcast feeds on Spotify or Apple Podcasts without ads to your inbox the morning of they're published, as well as a bunch of other new content we have over there, including articles and exclusive videos with the GSPN crew and GSPN After Dark. I know Ty, Rohan, and Andrew just finished dropping one as well. That'll be published in around the same time this is Friday morning as you're listening to this pod faithfully. So go check out that. Subscribe if you'd like to be a founding member or just a regular sub. Either way, we'd appreciate it if you would be so kind. Otherwise, just check out the rest of the pods. Eurostep 1 and 6. As we talk about the draft coming up, I know Ty and Rohan just released a pod this week talking about trying to find, was it Derek Jones Jr.? Yeah. And since he's had such a great playoffs with the Mavericks, how can the Bucks replicate somebody like that and look at other candidates in free agency and trade targets that they could possibly pursue? And then Cruising for a Bruising with Adam and Andrew as they talk the most recent series with the Brewers as they got swept by the Phillies and what was 3 competitive games. It doesn't help when your 3 starters, who are relatively no names across the league, go against Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, and uh, Mr. Suarez. I forget his first name, but uh, all very good pitchers, like 3 aces, I would say almost. But they head to Detroit this weekend to face the Tigers. So go check out that series recap in your podcast feeds now. And then make time for this. I think their last episode is still the Challengers episode. Um, it is, but go check out that or any of the other episodes they have on multiple other movies that are pop culture hits. So that does it for us folks. Go check out gspn.info. We'll be back in your podcast feeds soon. Thank you for listening. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.